The Sutra on the Middle Way. I heard these words of Buddha one time when the Lord was staying at the guest house in the forest. At the time, the Venerable Kaccayana came to visit him and asked, "The Tathagata has spoken of right view. How would that Tathagata describe the right view?" The Buddha said, "People in the world tend to believe in one of two views, the view of being or the view of non-being. That is because they are bound to wrong perception. It is wrong perception that leads to the concepts of being and non-being." Kaccayana, most people are bound to the internal formation of discrimination and preference, grasping and attachment. Those who are not bound to the internal knots of grasping and attachment no longer imagine and cling to the idea of a self. They understand that suffering comes to be when conditions are favorable, and that it fades away when conditions are no longer favorable. They no longer have any doubts. Their understanding has not come to them through others. It is their own insight. This insight is called right view, and this is the way the Tathagata would describe right view. How is this so? When a person who has correct insight observes the coming to be of the world, the idea of non-being does not arise in her. And when she observes the fading away of the world, the idea of being does not arise in her mind. Viewing the world as being is one extreme. Viewing it as non-being is another extreme. The Tathagata avoids these two extremes and teaches Dhamma dwelling in the middle way. The middle way says that this is because that is. This is not because that is not. Because there is ignorance, there are impulses. And because there are impulses, there is consciousness. There is the psychisoma. Because there is the psychisoma, there are six. Because there are six senses, there is contact. Because there is contact, there is feeling. Because there is feeling, there is craving. Because there is craving, there is grasping. Because there is grasping, there is becoming. Because there is becoming, there is birth. Because there is birth, there are old age, death, grief, and sorrow. That is how this entire mess of suffering arises. But with the fading away of ignorance, impulses cease. With the fading away of impulses, consciousness ceases. And finally, birth, old age, death, grief, and sorrow will fade away. That is how this entire mess of suffering ceases. After listening to the Buddha, the Venerable Kaccayana was enlightened and liberated from sorrow. He was able to untie all of his internal knots and attain arhatship. Sammukta Agama 301. The Buddha speaks about the 12 links of dependent co-arising. The first link is ignorance, avidya, and it informs all the other links. Vidya means seeing, understanding. Light. Avidya means blindness, lack of understanding, lack of light. The second link is volitional action, samskara, motivating energy, and the impulse to cling to being. The third link is consciousness, vijnana. Consciousness is filled with unwholesome and erroneous tendencies, which bring about suffering. The fourth link is the psyche, soma, mind and body. It is also called namarupa, name and form, referring to the mental element and physical element of our being. Both mind and body are objects of our consciousness. The fifth link is the six ayatanas, which are the six sense organs: eyes, ears, nose, tongue, body, and mind, accompanied by their objects: forms, sounds, smells, taste, tactile objects, and the objects of mind. These six ayatanas do not exist separately from mind-body, the fourth link, but are listed separately to help us see them more clearly. The sixth link is the contact, sparsha, between sense organ and sense object. This brings about sense consciousness. When eyes and form, ears and sound, nose and smell, tongue and taste, body and touch, and mind and object of mind come into contact, sense consciousness is born. Contact is an important basis for feelings, Vedana. The seventh link. Feelings can be pleasant, unpleasant, neutral, or mixed. We tend to become very attached to our feelings. The eighth link is craving, trishna, or desire. The ninth link is grasping or attachment, upadana. It means we are caught into the object. The 10th link is becoming, bhava, being or coming to be. Because we desire something, it comes to be. We have to look deeply to know what we really want. The 11th link is birth, jati. The 12th link is old age, death, and decay, jaramarana. The Buddha said that the teachings on the 12 links of causation are the essence of his teaching. The 12 links were never meant to be understood in a linear way, with each link leading only to the next. Each link could not exist without all the others. Studying the 12 links of dependent co-arising helps us diminish the element of ignorance and increase the element of clarity. If you look into your body or your emotion in one moment of your daily life, you will see that all of the 12 links are present in that moment. These 12 causes and conditions lean on each other, are committed to each other, and bring about the great mass of suffering. When we practice mindfulness, we can see that the 12 links of dependent co-arising can be informed by wisdom instead of by ignorance. When wisdom is the first link, all the other links are influenced by it. For example, sometimes a feeling is accompanied not by ignorance but by understanding, lucidity, or loving kindness, which can result in compassionate action. To say that feeling brings about craving is not precise enough. Feeling with attachment and ignorance brings about craving. In the cycle based on ignorance, living beings drift and sink because of their deluded mind. When feelings are conditioned by wisdom, dependent co-arising can also bring about mindfulness, liberation, and nirvana. The cycle based on clarity and awareness is the one in which the Bodhisattva realize awakening. When you light up the lamp of awareness, you will see how the 12 links of dependent co-arising are working. You will say, let's not let the links work like that anymore. We've suffered enough. When we bring mindfulness into the picture, our ignorance becomes less dark and clarity arises. Very often our suffering and despair help us to awaken. Thus clarity can come from ignorance. When the lamp is alight, the ignorance in our attachment and despair will transform. Our clarity gives rise to bodhicitta, the great aspiration. The cycle based on wisdom, we have something that's equivalent to Psychisoma, that is the Nirmana Kaya, the transformation body of the Buddha. We see our connection with all other living beings. Living beings contain hatred and darkness. Now our presence can bring freshness and happiness. The Nirmana Kaya is the form in which a Bodhisattva is present. There are still the six senses, but now wisdom is their basis. For an ordinary person, the six senses are the cause of bondage, because they have ignorance at their base. In the transformation body of the Bodhisattva, the six senses are there, but they do not have ignorance in them. They have the great vow in them. The transformation body of the Bodhisattva is also in contact with the sense objects. There had to be contact between the sense organs and the objects, because the Bodhisattva is in the world in order to be in touch. In that contact, there is mindfulness. With mindfulness, there is clarity, great aspiration, and wisdom. Contact leads to feeling, but now feeling contains mindfulness. When there is mindfulness, there will still be pleasant, unpleasant, and neutral feelings. But these feelings no longer contain ignorance. Instead, they contain great aspiration and wisdom. When there is painful feeling, the Bodhisattva knows it. It is a painful feeling. When there is a pleasant feeling, the Bodhisattva knows it is a pleasant feeling. So there is no wrong perception within feelings. They are recognized for what they are. Poem from Nagarjuna talks about emptiness and dependent co-arising. All phenomena that arise interdependently, I say that they are empty. Words come to an end because their message is false. Words come to an end because there is a middle way. If we look carefully into the 12 links of dependent co-arising, we will see the teaching of emptiness. The Buddha said, whoever sees dependent co-arising sees Buddha, and whoever has seen the Buddha has seen dependent co-arising. In our lives, we may ask, who am I? What am I doing here? These are philosophical questions. The Buddha said the reason we ask such questions is that we are caught in the idea of self, in the idea of me and mine. If we can see dependent co-arising, we will not ask this question anymore. The Buddha advises us not to study philosophy, but to give our time to looking deeply into reality and to being able to see the true abiding of all dharmas. When we can meditate on interdependent co-arising, we go beyond the questions. Buddha said, when we go beyond the questions, we are like a palm tree that has had its top cut off. All our wrong perception will no longer arise. When we've been able to see the nature of interdependent arising, we'll overcome ideas of self, living being, and so on, and ignorance and suffering will no longer touch us. We'll no longer suffer because of our wrong views. Walking the path of the middle way. One day Buddha asked the monk Sona, is it true that before you became a monk you were a musician? He said yes. Buddha asked, what happens if the string of your instrument is too loose? When you pluck it, there will be no sound. What happens when the string is too tight? It will break. The practice of the way is the same. The sutra on the middle way has profound meaning, but only when we discover how to apply the teachings in it to our daily lives can they be truly beneficial. Even when we are able to talk eloquently about the middle way, no self or dependent co-arising, we still need to ask, how can these teachings be put into practice every day? The first way is to notice our attachment to the teachings themselves. Not only do views such as permanence and self need to be transcended, so do impermanence, non-self, and nirvana. The Buddha says the teachings are like a raft that helps us to the other shore. Once there, we leave the rafts on the shore for others to use. The teachings, like the rafts, need to be released. It's said that near the end of his life, the Buddha said, in 45 years of teaching, I have not said anything. In fact, he said a lot of things, but he didn't want his listeners to get caught in his words. For ease of understanding, we speak of teachings such as impermanence, non-self, and interbeing as right view. But we know these are teachings to help us. They are not theories. When presenting the 12 links of dependent co-arising, the Buddha says that ignorance gives rise to impulses. Ignorance means that we don't understand what is happening, so we behave in a certain way. If we were able to see clearly, we would behave differently. Our habit energy is what causes us to repeat the same behavior thousands of times. Habit energy pushes us to run, to always be doing something, to be lost in thoughts of the past. The practice of mindfulness helps us to recognize that habitual energy. Every time we can recognize the habit energy in us, we are able to stop and to enjoy the present moment. The energy of mindfulness is the full awareness of the present moment. This energy is generated from the practice of mindful breathing, mindful walking, mindful drinking, mindful eating, and so on. The energy of mindfulness carries within itself the energy of concentration. When you are mindful of something, whether that something is a flower or whatever, you become concentrated on the object of your mindfulness. The more you are mindful, the more concentrated you become. The energy of concentration is born from the energy of mindfulness. Mindfulness, concentration, and insight are the energies that make up the Buddha. These three kinds of energy can transform habit energy and lead to healing and nourishment. A few days of practice mindful breathing and mindful walking can make a big difference. Whatever habit energies arise, we can accept and recognize them, and then they won't push us to behave in negative ways. We can say to our habit energy, I will look after you, habit energy. I will discover what your root is. When we suffer, we make those around us suffer. We think we are the only one person who is suffering, but in fact we are creating suffering for other people. The aim of Buddhist practice is to go from the field of phenomena down into the level of substance, of true nature. We go from being caught in conventional designations, parent, child, I, you, flowers, down into the level of the middle way, which goes beyond all conventional designation. If we continue to be imprisoned by the habit energies, we will never liberate ourselves. When we first come to Buddhism, we can immediately experience mindful breathing, and it makes us feel better. There's tendency to grasp hold of this and think, if I can breathe, if I can smile, if I am able to follow my breathing when I feel a bit angry, then there's enough already. This kind of thinking stops us from going deeply into the deep teaching of non-discrimination that brings us to fearlessness, to the insight that helps us break through all our fetters. The teachings on right view and dependent co-arising offer us guidance on how to be with others. The insight generated from our understanding of the sutra on the middle way can dissolve habit energy and generate the energies of great insight, love, and compassion. These energies can liberate us from suffering and help us to hand on to the future generations enough insight and love to release them from suffering like ours. We have to learn to live in happiness in the present moment. Every moment we walk in the present moment is a moment of liberation. Every step like this can liberate us and liberate countless generations of ancestors and descendants. With each step we walk with the Buddha.